Have you ever had the thought that maybe everything we do is motivated by self-interest, and that even when we help others, we're only doing it for what we might get out of it? This idea is known as psychological egoism. Psychological egoism claims that everything we do is self-interested and that all concern for others is really just a concern for ourselves. In other words, it denies that any altruism, that is, any genuine concern for others, is even possible. It's easy to see how one might think there's some truth to this idea, especially because at times we discover we have some self-serving ulterior motive that we didn't recognize at first. Such motives needn't be anything malicious, but they may involve doing things just to look good for others, or only to get some personal benefit, or simply because we want to feel good about ourselves. The main point of psychological egoism is that we never care about others simply for their own sake. Which, if it were true, would be a surprising claim. But is it true? And do the arguments in favor of psychological egoism actually hold up? Well, it turns out there are major problems with them. Let's look briefly at one of these. One of the most common types of arguments in favor of psychological egoism begins with something like the claim that we always do what we value most. It then says, whenever we do what we value most, we're only acting in our own interest. Because after all, we're only doing what we value most. And if those two premises were true, it would logically follow that our every action was self-interested. But there's a major problem with the second premise. The first premise is somewhat controversial as well, but the second premise is truly fatal. Here's the problem. Even if it were true that we always do what we value most, it doesn't follow that we only value our own self-interest the most. We can't just assume that. This illustrates a logical fallacy known as begging the question, in which we assume in the premises what we're trying to establish in the conclusion of an argument. So contrary to that second premise, it may well be that what we value most is the happiness of someone else. In fact, it seems clear we do value the happiness and well-being of others the most, at least on particular occasions, as when we see someone who's injured, or feel genuine empathy for someone suffering, or have a deep sense of love for someone we care about. So these arguments for psychological egoism fail. But of course, psychological egoists will try other tactics, which we'll examine another time. One final thought. Even if psychological egoism is wrong, it may still be true that we're more selfish than we think we are. However, as we'll see another time, self-interest and selfishness are not identical. In order to discern when self-interest becomes blameworthy, we'll need to examine important issues central to moral philosophy concerning the relation of morally justified self-interest and our obligations to others. These are among the topics we'll explore going forward. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.